I caught the AD 122 bus to Wool, leaving Hexham over the same bridge Wainwright would have walked over.
We're just leaving Wool. Wainwright came through Wool and he was really excited because he knew that was evidence that he was coming up to the Wall. I was desperately keen. The Wall had become suddenly and urgently of tremendous importance. It meant something to me which it could not possibly have meant to others who had been before me. If I'd driven to it in a car, I doubt whether what I saw that day would have interested me sufficiently to tempt me to get out. But I had walked. Nobody ever came to the Wall in the same frame of mind as mine that day. Around 11 o'clock on the morning of September the 30th, I really lived. I shed everything that 30 years had clothed me with. Restraint and staidness vanished into the sparkling air. I was alive, alert, eager, as a little boy awakening on Christmas morning. The sun was shining. Life was good. Existence at last had a meaning. I came to the Wall as I knew I would, half running. It's a shame, but I don't think we'll be walking next to the Wall for a bit. I think there's going to be a road because in the 1700s General Wade unfortunately tore up a 20-mile section of the Wall and built military roads in its foundations. I suppose they didn't have the same idea of conservation back then.
There are some remarkably complete sections of the Wall here. The first Roman bridge at Chester's was built in AD 122 to carry the Wall over the North Tyne. A second bridge was built in the AD 160s, wide enough to carry the military array across the river. It was demolished after the Roman occupation to provide building materials for St Wilfrid's Church in Hexham. Wainwright explored the old fort of Chester's across the river, and it came back to life in his imagination.
At one time, the Roman bridge would have spanned the river to the other side.
Wainwright followed the road to the fort of Borcovicium, now called Howsteads. As he walked around the ruins, he thought it looked as though the whole community had been wiped out in some terrible disaster. But then he heard and saw, with his vivid imagination, the fort as it had been, the sounds of trumpets and of a marching army. After leaving Halstead, Wainwright left the road to follow the wall across the rocky crags. Arriving in Haltwhistle, I was excited to pass the Grey Bull, where Wainwright stayed the night. I don't think the centre of Haltwhistle's changed all that much over the years.
Leaving Haltwhistle, Wainwright came down off the wall into Haltwhistle. He didn't really like it though. He said it was quite depressing and grey. I think at that time a lot of the industries were going and it was going for a lot of changes. On the bus we passed the Grey Bull where he stayed. I've taken a picture of it, but it was so cold in the night. He ended up ripping all the carpets up, putting them over his bed, tried to get warm, and it wasn't that well at all. So his impression of Haltwhistle sadly wasn't favourable, but I found it a nice little town, centre of Britain for some strange reason. Mind you, he also had a real disappointment because when he was in Hexham, took his films in to be developed to have them delivered to Haltwhistle the next day. And he described his eagerness of getting his films and his prints rather, and his desire to turn them into an illustrated guide. And when he got the prints, he was really disappointed because the quality was just rubbish. And first of all, he had this big inward rant at the lady behind the till for careless handling. Then he remembered earlier on it was his own fault because he'd opened his aperture to let more light in and forgotten to close it again. It was his own fault his negatives were ruined. And he was so disappointed. He said he could have just got on the train and gone home there and then, but he decided not to. I guess that's the beauty of modern day photography. You can see what you've taken instantly. You can see if you've got it or not. Wonder what it made of that. I think that's one development he'd been quite impressed with. He might have even approved. Lovely viaduct. Wainwright, of course, didn't come down here. He was coming down the road. Over there, I think, or even over there. This was still a working railway when he came here in 1938. In fact, it's still a working railway when the Pennine Way was set up, else it might have utilised this, but a lot of people do anyway.
I'd completely underestimated today. Instead of the 4 miles or so I thought I faced from Haltwhistle to Slaggyford, it was more like 8 or 9, and I only had a small bottle of water with me. I was so glad to finally reach Slaggyford. I'd run out of water ages ago and was dehydrated, and my feet were on fire. Wainwright called at the post office before finding someone to make him a supper, which he said was excellent. He left Slaggyford quite late, heading for Alston.